Merry Christmas!
When looking back on classic Christmas films, there are a number of memorable quotes that have rippled throughout time and inspired generations.
Every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings.
You'll shoot your eye out, kid.
Merry Christmas, Charlie Brown!
Put that cookie down! Now!
Now you might be saying, wait a minute, Jingle All the Way doesn't belong in there. And you're right, because it's better.
I'm not a pervert. I just was looking for Turbo Man doll.
Alright, I'm obviously joking when I say that, but I genuinely consider it to be a holiday classic despite its poor critical reception, and I know I can't be the only one.
Where's your Christmas spirit?
Here's why Jingle All the Way wasn't that bad. When I think about Jingle All the Way, the 1996 family comedy, the first thing that comes to mind is a memory of me at 11 years old with my cousin Matthew, staying up until midnight watching the movie on VHS, cackling at this one very specific noise that Arnold Schwarzenegger makes when he desperately jumps for a bouncy ball. I cannot tell you how many times we rewound that just to hear it again and again and again.
This is the best day of my life. Mine too!
That's the kind of brain that I had in my head at 11 years old. And it's the same brain I have now that looks back at Jingle All the Way and struggles to see it objectively. I can function like an adult for most of my life, balancing my budget, doing laundry, making sure I keep my dog alive, but when I watch Jingle All the Way, I'm 11 years old again. This episode of It Wasn't That Bad is yet another attempt of me trying to look at one of my favorite childhood movies and recognize the flaws, but more importantly, point out what's objectively good about it, and make a strong case for it. For those of you who don't know, here's the basic premise.
Howard, do you have any idea what time it is?
I know. You should have seen the traffic, and on top of that, I got a speeding ticket.
Don't explain it to me. It wasn't my karate class you missed.
In an attempt to make up for his shortcomings as a workaholic father and husband,
I didn't make it.
Howard Langston promises his son a Turbo Man action figure for Christmas.
Johnny's gonna get one, and so's everybody else I know. Whoever doesn't is gonna be a real loser.
Well, it definitely won't be you.
But upon trying to find one on Christmas Eve, finds that it's the most in-demand toy ever.
Hey, everybody! These two are looking for a Turbo Man!
In his quest for the toy, Arnold encounters obstacles along the way, like an unhinged mailman played by Sinbad,
So you know I'm not stable. Tell him.
This man is totally insane.
an overzealous neighbor played by Phil Hartman,
You might want to wrap some chains around those tires.
You should wrap some chains around you.
What?
and an underground ring of Santa Clauses selling cheap knockoffs of toys. Among them, there's James Belushi, The Big Show, and Vern Troyer. And in the finale, Arnold unwittingly gets suited up as the Turbo Man in a Christmas parade, with Sinbad assuming the role of the arch nemesis.
This man is totally insane.
At its core, Jingle All the Way is a satire on commercialism around the holidays, something that had been explored briefly in other movies.
We all know that Christmas is a big commercial racket. It's run by a big Eastern syndicate, you know.
But this movie was the first to address the shopping craze that we've all come to associate with Black Friday or the weeks leading up to Christmas. In fact, this is exactly what the writer, Randy Kornfield, cited as the inspiration for the script in an interview for the only podcast about movies.
The story behind it was I had a son, my firstborn, who was 4 or 5-ish, I don't know, totally into Power Rangers. The whole family was constantly on the hunt for the Power Rangers paraphernalia, different color Power Rangers. It was crazy.
It's the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, Teenage Defenders of Earth.
You know, it sort of came from that, sprouted from that. Standing in line for hours on end for a toy and going to different places here and there to look for one, all to make your kid happy, spending thousands of dollars.
Yep.
Yep.
Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, too hot to handle.
Also, by pure coincidence, Jingle All the Way was released during the same year people were going nuts to buy Tickle Me Elmo dolls.
No Tickle Me Elmo.
How perfect is that? In this way, Jingle All the Way was the first big movie to touch on all this madness, and like some of the best satires, like Brazil, or Network, or The Great Dictator, it's still relevant. And yes, I just compared Jingle All the Way to The Great Dictator. It's nowhere near as deep or prophetic. Nobody's doing fan cuts of Sinbad's monologue, putting music from Inception behind it.
They spend billions of dollars on TV advertisement, and then they sit there and use subliminal messages to suck your children's minds out.
But it's a good marketable idea for a comedy, and it turned out to be a decent satire.
So I'm offering this simple praise.
One major thing the movie also had going for it, obviously, was its star, Arnold Schwarzenegger. Especially in the 90s, Arnold had a physique that was tailored perfectly for action films.
Son of a bitch.
But he also had a charm to him that helped when he did comedies, especially comedies that took his size and persona into consideration to do something fun and ironic. This is why we got classics like Twins, Kindergarten Cop,
It's not a tumor.
and then Jingle All the Way. These comedies all work on some level just from Arnold's involvement, and maybe it's part of a bigger thing, like how it's fun to watch a big manly guy do something that makes him look ridiculous. It makes him affable, like he's willing to poke fun at himself. Arnold's also genuinely funny, and the best parts of the movie harken back to an old quote from Crispin Glover when he was being interviewed about his performance in Hot Tub Time Machine.
Hey! I am not going to tell you again!
Quote, play comedy like tragedy and tragedy like comedy. Arnold's best scenes in Jingle All the Way are when he's treating this search for a Turbo Man doll like he's fighting a predator.
You picked the wrong day.
The intensity that he has, the dramatic close-ups, it all works as proper homages to Arnold's career in action films.
And he's in my house, putting up my star on my tree.
Wait, I think I've heard that line somewhere before.
There's someone in my house eating my birthday cake with my family, and it's not me.
Anyway, moving on. My absolute favorite scene in this movie is when he breaks into the radio station. Look at his face, he's completely unhinged. Which makes Martin Mull's reaction hilarious.
I got a madman in my studio, and help me!
And when Sinbad comes in, threatens them both with a bomb, and it turns out that he was lying, Arnold's reaction as he realizes this is amazing. But arguably the best part of Jingle All the Way isn't Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Sorry about that, Howie.
It's Phil Hartman.
Howard, I'm of the mindset you can never do too much to make a child's Christmas magical.
His SNL work, his voices on The Simpsons, even his pivotal involvement in developing the character of Pee Wee Herman with Paul Reubens, all of these accomplishments were just leading up to the role of a lifetime as Ted, Arnold's obnoxious divorcee neighbor.
Where you off to so early?
Picking up a Christmas present for Jamie.
Whoa! Nothing like waiting until the last minute, Howard, sir.
If the movie were told from Ted's perspective, it might go something like this. A divorced and miserable single father maintains a joyous facade as he tries to sleep with as many housewives as possible, especially Liz, the wife of his next-door neighbor Howard, an Austrian immigrant mattress salesman who embodies every jock bully he ever grew up with.
You can't bench press your way out of this one.
Every scene with Phil Hartman is pure gold, but the best ones are between he and Arnold.
I need to speak to my wife. So could you get her on the phone, please?
I think she's in the shower, Howard. Do you want me to go check?
No!
These scenes are perfect examples of how well subtext can be used. For example, watch this scene when Arnold comes home to see Ted putting Christmas lights on his house.
I had some extra lights in the garage, and since you didn't put up any yourself, I thought, what the heck? Why not spread a little Christmas cheer around the neighborhood?
Oh, gee, Ted. How thoughtful.
Now let's watch it again, but with the proper subtext. I had some extra time in my day because my life isn't in shambles like yours, and since you're not much of a man, I thought, what the heck? Why not take this opportunity to not only prove my superiority over you, but in a public way also reinforce my persona as the nice guy neighbor so I can more housewives. I see right through you, you piece of shit. Oh hey, sorry to hear you're a Father, but don't worry. Your kid will be calling me Daddy soon.
I've seriously thought about killing you. Bye.
There is so much subtext with Ted, especially sexual innuendo. This all went over my head as a kid, but there are a couple really sexual lines that are said off-screen.
I was wondering if you'd mind taking a look at my porch light. It just doesn't seem to be working, and you being such a handyman.
Sure, I've got just the tool for the job.
You're an amazing man, Ted. I wish every husband were more like you.
Thanks. We should get together and swap recipes.
But the best one by far is...
Howard, excuse me, but your wife's cookies are out of this world.
Who told you you can eat my cookies?
Another thing I love about Hartman's character is that there are hints at how much of a horrible person he actually is. There's the character of Ted that he puts on, the nice guy neighbor who will do anything for you.
Christmas comes but once a year.
But then there's the real Ted, the Ted that only comes out in flashes like a budding serial killer.
Pipe down in there!
But in order to get a full picture of this movie, let's briefly talk about what people said were the flaws.
Well, of course, there's some assembly required.
Critics pointed out things like an uneven tone, a choice to favor action and violence over dialogue and plot, and one part of the movie that I'm genuinely surprised was in here was this scene where Sinbad threatens Arnold with a mail bomb.
This, Master Trackstar, is a homemade explosive device.
A bomb?
Now, I know, whatever, it's a movie, but it just seems like weird timing considering the movie came out the same year the Unabomber was finally arrested. And look, I don't care that this is in the movie. I'm not oversensitive about it or anything. It just seems odd.
Just a sick world we're living in. Sick people.
After reflecting on the movie, one thing that I think is actually kind of a stretch is the fact that a 260-pound, all-muscle Austrian dude named Howard Langston is a mattress salesman.
200 king size by next Friday. No problem whatsoever, but only for you, Mr. Jacobs, because you're our #1 customer.
One small detail is that you never get a clear shot of Arnold's ridiculous muscles. The whole movie he's wearing layers of clothing almost all the time. My guess is that this was done to make him more relatable as a normal guy. If you saw him like he looks in this behind-the-scenes footage of the film, walking around with no sleeves on, smoking a cigar, it doesn't exactly say mattress salesman. It says, I might f you up. And finally, one part of the movie that seems to get a lot of hate is Jake Lloyd as Arnold's son. People have shit on this kid so much, and I have to defend him because he was a kid. He fulfilled his duty in playing the son you feel sorry for in a kid's movie. I'll defend him in Star Wars also. I remember when Episode 1 came out, Star Wars fans were going nuts about how much they hated him, and it was undeserved. I'm defending Jake partly because I sort of have an odd connection with him. My current acting manager, Beverly, is the same manager that represented Jake Lloyd when he signed on for Star Wars. Here she is in a behind-the-scenes video of the making of Episode 1.
What's it been like? You've been telling all your friends you're leaving for Star Wars, huh?
She told me once how he was really upset because he would just get hate mail constantly. There's nothing to be gained by criticizing a kid, so Jake, from me to you, you did fine. I hope you're doing okay, whatever you're doing, and I hope that every March you get a big fat residual check from December airings of Jingle All the Way. So overall, I understand the hate for Jingle All the Way. It's no Citizen Kane, nor does it try to be. But just like that scene in Citizen Kane where Charles Foster Kane, he stands up and he's just applauding his wife's failed opera career and nobody else is digging it, I will gladly stand up and praise this movie for what it does well, which is taking a niche idea that had never been expanded to a full-length movie before and just going balls to the wall with it. That, I think, as an adult, is what I respect the most about it. In my spare time, I make attempts to write screenplays, and although I've experienced much more failure than success, there is so much to learn from a movie like Jingle All the Way. It's one thing to have the idea of a guy trying to get an in-demand toy for his son, but it's a whole other ballgame to write a screenplay that hits all the right beats and effectively markets itself to a broad audience. That's something that really does take talent and a deep knowledge of the industry. Now that might be what I respect about it as an adult, but I still have this kind of warm little place in my heart for Jingle All the Way that was just planted as a nostalgia seed when I was a kid, and nothing can change that first impression. And that is, in more ways than one, why Jingle All the Way wasn't that bad.
Where have you guys been? Turbo Man's only the hottest selling Christmas toy ever. You know what? We got plenty of Turbo Man's faithful saber-tooth
What are you talking about?
Lines on the block and millions and jillions of people turning out to vote. Almost as many people as there were on the opening night of my smash holiday movie classic, Jingle All the Way.
All right, now that's just ridiculous.
All right, and it's coming up, and noise. All right, rewind again. Hands, hold on. Hold each other's hands. All right, and then just look entranced at the TV.